making the headlines tonight. The King of Cambodia, His Majesty King Norodom Sihamoni, and His Majesty Queen Mother of Cambodia departed to China for health checkup. Prime Minister Hun Sen reaffirmed his vote in favour of the UN General Assembly. His decision was made to protect the truth. Vladimir will be angry. Ambassadors at the United Nations Conference have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and dangers posed by nuclear weapons. Ash Barty withdraws from the Indian Wells and the Miami Open tennis tournaments, saying her body is not recovered after Australian Open. And finally, David Martella, a 40-year-old Italian pianist known as the Piano Man, travelled to the Polish border to serenade arriving Ukraine refugees. This is the Daily Roundup on EAC News Channel. A very good evening to you. I'm Anthony Ellis. The King of Cambodia, His Majesty King Norodom Sihamoni, and Her Majesty the Queen Mother of Cambodia departed to China on Friday for a health checkup. Their special flight left Phnom Penh International Airport around 9 a.m. on Friday morning. According to his official Facebook page, Prime Minister Hun Sen wished His Majesty King Norodom Sihamoni and the Queen Mother great power, wisdom, good health and longevity, and to watch over the people and live in peace forever. Prime Minister Hun Sen was at the airport for a proper send-off for the King and Queen Mother this morning. During their absence, the President of the Senate, Say Chong, will act as the acting head of state until their return to Cambodia. The King and Queen Mother visit China for health checkups at least twice a year. Prime Minister Hun Sen reaffirmed his decision to vote in favour of the UN General Assembly resolution with the demand that Russia immediately, completely and unconditionally withdraw all its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognised borders. He stated that the decision was made to protect the truth and so that Cambodia would continue being a responsible member of the United Nations. EAC News reporter Darshana Gujin has more details.
According to the official Facebook page of the Cambodia Government Spokesperson Unit, Prime Minister Hun Sen sent a message to the leaders of the Standing Committee of the party, the Standing Committee of the government, as well as members of the royal government on Wednesday night, saying that the situation in Ukraine is worsening and civilian deaths are increasing while the UN General Assembly is processing. The Prime Minister said he believes that Cambodia should act in the situation both on the behalf of ASEAN and Cambodia itself. He said, within the framework of ASEAN, we are in discussions with other ASEAN members to issue a statement calling for a ceasefire, because without a ceasefire, human life and property will continue to die and be destroyed. He continued, we must decide to call for a ceasefire or negotiations cannot move forward. This is one of the desirable solutions on behalf of ASEAN. The Prime Minister further stated that he hopes that Russia will understand because what Russia has done recently is against Cambodian policy on foreign affairs, as the country condemns separatism and the use of force on others. He said, of course Russia will be angry with us, but as a sovereign state, we have the right to act to defend the truth, and we also have a responsibility as a member of the United Nations.
Resolution ES-11/1 passed today with the support of 141 member states. It reflects the international community's grave concerns about the ongoing situation in Ukraine and reiterates the call for an immediate ceasefire.
On Wednesday night, Cambodia joined 140 other UN member states to vote in favor of the UN General Assembly resolution demanding that Russia immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw all of its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. In a statement issued on Thursday, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation said that during the voting process, Cambodia expressed concern over the escalating situation and the worsening humanitarian conditions caused by the ongoing military hostilities in Ukraine. Cambodia believes in dialogue and diplomacy to prevent the current situation from spiraling out of control and wishes to seek a peaceful solution in accordance with the international law and the principles of the UN Charter. Cambodia's official stance on the situation is that all member states must respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of other member states. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
The US Ambassador to Cambodia, Patrick Murphy, congratulated Cambodia for joining 140 other UN member states to vote in favour of the UN General Assembly resolution calling after Russia to stop the war and withdraw troops from Ukraine. EAC News reporter Decca Nin has further details.
Ambassador Patrick Murphy wrote on his Twitter account on Thursday, March 3rd, saying it was excellent to see Cambodia and Singapore join the US and many others in co-sponsoring a UN resolution that most ASEAN nations supported, deploring Russian aggression and demanding an end to its unprovoked war against Ukraine. The world is taking action to hold Russia accountable. On Wednesday night, Cambodia joined 140 other countries to vote in favor of the UN General Assembly resolution, demanding that Russia immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw all of its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Prime Minister Hun Sen has said that he hopes that Russia will understand this decision because what Russia has done in the recent past is against Cambodian policy on foreign affairs, as the country condemns separatism and the use of force on others. He said, of course, Russia will be angry with us, but as a sovereign state, we have the right to act to defend the truth, and we also have responsibility as a member of the United Nations. Dekanin, EAC News.
The Asian foreign ministers released a statement on Thursday afternoon calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The statement included that the foreign ministers are deeply troubled by the dangerous escalation in the Russian-Ukraine war, which could lead to further blown humanitarian crisis. EAC News reporter Darshana Gochan has more details.
The ASEAN foreign ministers have stated that they call for an immediate ceasefire or armistice and continuation of political dialogues that would lead to sustainable peace in Ukraine. They continued to state, "We underline the importance of a ceasefire to create an enabling environment for negotiations to address the current crisis and avoid expanding suffering of innocent people, confront the issue by calling an immediate ceasefire or armistice and continuation of political dialogues that would lead to sustainable peace in Ukraine." The statement reiterates that ASEAN stands ready to facilitate in any possible way peaceful dialogue among all concerned parties. On Thursday, 24th February, Russia launched a major offense against Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin justified this action by saying there was an urgent need for Russia to launch a military operation to demilitarize Ukraine in order to protect the Donbas Republic and to ensure that Russia will not be under NATO threat from Ukrainian territory. The US-led West has responded to the offensive by imposing new sanctions on Russia and are also preparing weapons in support of Ukrainian forces. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
The Royal Government has put into place a strategic plan to develop garment, footwear and bag sector in Cambodia between 2021 and 24, which will ensure long-term stability of the sector to help attract investors in Cambodia. EAC News reporter Decca Nin has more.
During a work meeting between the President of the Garment Manufacturers Association of Cambodia, Kong San, and the Minister of Labor and Vocational Training at Samhaeng, held on Thursday morning at the Office of the Minister of Labor, Minister Samhaeng said that the field of employment and vocational training is considered a main priority under the strategic framework for the development of garment, footwear, and bag sector. The government has set out a strategy to develop this sector between 2021 to 2024, which will ensure the sector's long-term sustainability and continued growth, as well as attract more investors to Cambodia. The Minister of Labor further stressed that the members of the GMAC, which has factories and enterprises doing businesses in this sector, must diligently implement the standard operating procedures to maintain the production chain and keep jobs for workers particularly during the rise of COVID-19 cases. The minister encouraged a peaceful community among all garment, footwear, and bag factories, enterprises, and establishments, urging for the enhancement of good relations and continued understanding between employers and workers for the common benefit of all. Dekanin, EAC News.
You're watching EAC News. Thanks for joining us. Cambodia has reported 366 new COVID-19 cases, including 26 are imported. There have been 507 patient recoveries and 5 deaths. Death rose Cambodia's record day of 28 Omicron surge. The kingdom recorded 340 new community and 28 new imported cases of the new variant, meaning that Cambodia has now recorded 11,297 cases of the Omicron, 987 imported, and 10,310 community cases. Cambodia's COVID-19 case tally has now climbed to 131,738. The death toll stands at 3,038. The number of patients treated successfully since the pandemic reached Cambodia at 125,536, and the tally for imported cases has climbed up to 20,844. Healthcare workers are currently treated a total of 3,088 patients. Now for the look at the news making international headlines Friday the 4th of March.
New Zealand police have moved on Wednesday, March 2, to end an anti-vaccine mandate protest that has disrupted the country's capital for the past 3 weeks, towing away cars and dismantling tents set up outside Parliament. Taking inspiration from truckers' demonstration in Canada, hundreds of protesters have been blocking streets with trucks, cars, and motorcycles in a protest that has led to violent clashes. Police have said 60 people were arrested during Wednesday's operation, and they had gained significant ground in efforts to clear the protesters. At least 3 officers were injured, police have reported. Protesters have used fire extinguishers, paint-filled projectiles, homemade plywood shields, and pitchforks as weapons, and a cord was set up as a tripwire, police said. Social media footage showed protesters throwing full water bottles and shouting abuse at the police. Authorities used loudspeakers to warn protesters they face arrest for trespassing on Parliament grounds if they refuse to leave. Pepper spray was used against some protesters. The protest began as a stand against COVID-19 vaccine mandates, but was later joined by groups calling for an end to all pandemic restrictions.
Russian Defense Ministry has released on Wednesday, March 2nd, a footage of the military helicopters supporting its troops during the Moscow special operations in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said on Tuesday that the Russian must stop bombing Ukraine cities before more talks could take place on Russia's invasion of the country. The latest Ukraine updates regarding the peace talks on Thursday between the two countries spur a deal on the humanitarian corridors. Kiev and Moscow agree on plan for safe corridors evacuate civilians.
Airstrikes in Ukraine Chernihiv region killed more than 30 as schools and homes in areas suffer major damage. At least 33 bodies have been recovered from the rubble in the wake of airstrikes by Russian forces on the Ukrainian city of Chernihiv on Thursday, March 3rd. The Ukrainian Emergency Services has said in an online post, updating a previous estimate of 22 killed. Rescue work has been temporarily suspended due to heavy shelling in the area, it said. Earlier, the original governor has confirmed 2 schools as well as private houses were hit.
Ambassadors of United Nations Conference on the Disarmament have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and stressed the dangers of poised nuclear weapons.
Comments came after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that if a third world war were to take place, it would involve nuclear weapons and be destructive. These comments came after Moscow puts its nuclear deterrent on high alert amid a barrage of Western reprisals over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In the last week, Ukraine has suffered horrific attacks. Missiles and airstrikes have torn through apartment blocks. Innocent people, including children, have lost their lives, and the Ukrainian people have endured widespread suffering. The invading Russian armed forces have bombarded civilian targets, including residential areas. They are responsible for hundreds of civilian casualties, including growing numbers of children. As a permanent member of the UN Security Council, Russia has a particular responsibility to uphold international peace and security. Instead, it is violating the borders of another sovereign country and repudiating the principles that every country has committed to uphold. It is now vital that Russia urgently de-escalates and withdraws its troops. It must be held accountable and stop undermining democracy, global stability, and international law. The United Kingdom and its international partners stand united in condemning the Russian government's reprehensible actions, which are in egregious violation of international law and the United Nations Charter and show flagrant disregard for its commitments under the Budapest Memorandum and the Minsk Agreements. In a speech, Japan's ambassador to the UN's conference on disarmament being held in Geneva said his country knows about the catastrophic use of atomic bombs, referring to the nuclear bombing by the United States on the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima at the end of the Second World War. Germany said Russia had in the past agreed that a nuclear war should never be fought. The United States Acting Permanent Representative Odd Franz McCarman remarks to the Conference on Disarmament on the situation in Ukraine has stated the United States condemns this senseless war, which puts Putin on the wrong side of history. The United States reaffirms its unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its international recognized borders, extending to its territorial waters. President Biden has said neither the United States nor NATO has any desire or intention for conflict with Russia. Russia is not under threat from the United States or NATO. The provocative rhetoric regarding nuclear weapons is reckless, adds to the risk of miscalculation, and should be avoided. Russia and the United States affirmed less than a year ago that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. This was also affirmed earlier this year in concert with P5 partners, noting that nuclear use would have far-reaching consequences. The United States stands by that statement and will continue to support dialogue and negotiations to reduce nuclear risks, including through verifiable agreements to limit nuclear weapons. A situation like this is exactly why practical work to promote security, non-proliferation, and disarmament is critical, why the Conference on Disarmament exists.
The measures among the latest sanctions introducing following the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has taken a series of countermeasures to deal with the economic sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies, including introducing temporary economic measures and raising interest rates.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree introducing temporary economic measures to ensure the country's financial stability, the Kremlin announced on Tuesday. Among the measures, Russia will ban the outflow of foreign currencies in an amount exceeding the equivalent of $10,000. Effective since Wednesday, restrictions regarding transactions of securities, real estate, and loans will be imposed on foreigners associated with countries that have taken anti-Russian actions. On Monday, Putin also inked a decree introducing special economic measures to cushion the impact of a new wave of Western sanctions. Russia's financial system has wobbled on Monday after a coalition of Western nations issued a joint statement on Saturday saying they would remove some Russian banks from SWIFT, the payment system used for most international financial transactions, in response to Moscow's ongoing military operations in Ukraine. In the face of its toughest sanctions to date, the ruble fell to an all-time low against the dollar, falling as low as 110 on Monday morning, before recovering below 100 USD during a volatile trading session. In response, the Russian central bank on Monday has raised its key interest rate from 9.5% to 20%. Exporters are also being asked to sell 80% of foreign exchange earnings in foreign trade. The Russian stock market suspended trading and residents are banned from transferring foreign currency to their accounts or deposits to foreign banks. The Russian central bank has said the emergency measures are meant to provide additional stability and to protect savings from devaluation. Life in Moscow has started showing signs of change. In some shopping malls, people can be seen queuing at ATMs to withdraw cash, but some experts have said the life of most people in Russia will not be affected by the economic sanctions. A majority of the Russian population purchases goods in the Russian market, and they will not experience any significant threats to their standard of living and quality, said Dmitry Orlov, head of the Agency of Political and Economic Communications.
Russia and Ukraine held their second round of peace talks on Thursday, which spurred a deal on humanitarian corridors where Kiev and Moscow agreed to plan safe corridors to evacuate civilians.
The Ukrainian delegation's agenda is to agree on an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian corridors to allow civilians to leave frontline communities, a Ukrainian presidential advisor, Mikhailo Podolyak, has said on Thursday. The Ukrainian delegation had arrived earlier in the day, while Russia's had come to the city on Wednesday. The head of the Russian delegation, Vladimir Medinsky, has told reporters on Wednesday that discussions would focus on issues related to a ceasefire and the need for a humanitarian corridor. We discussed our positions at our previous meetings. Russia put forward a number of initiatives related to an immediate ceasefire, he has said. The first round of talks between Russia and Ukraine was held on Monday with no concrete results after discussions that lasted for about 5 hours. Both sides, however, agreed to hold a second round of negotiations to achieve a ceasefire. Over 2,000 civilians have been killed since Russia launched its war on Ukraine on February 24, according to Ukrainian authorities, while the UN Refugee Agency estimates more than 874,000 people have fled to neighboring countries.
After the break, a look at all the latest sports news.
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear.
World number 1 Ash Barty on Thursday withdrew from the Indian Wells and the Miami Open tennis tournaments, saying her body was not recovered after her January triumphs in the Australian Open.
The 25-year-old Australian has struggled with shoulder, back, and foot injuries during her career, in which she has won 3 different Grand Slam events. Unfortunately, my body has not recovered the way I hoped after the Australian Open, and I have not been able to adequately prepare for Indian Wells and Miami, she wrote in a message on Twitter. I don't believe I am at the level necessary to win these events, and as a result, I have decided to withdraw from both tournaments, she said. I love these events, and I'm sad not to be there competing, but getting my body right must be my focus. But his opponent in the Australian Open final, top-ranked American Danielle Collins, also withdrew from the Indian Wells on Thursday, citing a continuing injury. The Indian Wells main draw begins next week with the Miami Open following at the end of the month.
One more, watch this ball. Watch it like it's a watermelon. That a boy.
Having braved bombs and gunfire, Ukraine's athletes have made it safely to the Beijing ahead of the Winter Paralympics that began on Friday, in which Ukraine Paralympic Committee President Valery Shavashkovich described as a miracle.
Ukraine has been under siege following an invasion by Russia, which prompted the International Paralympic Committee on Thursday to ban Russian and Belarusian athletes from the Games after earlier allowing them to compete as neutrals. Belarus has been a key staging area for the invasion. Not coming here would have been taking the easy option. Our presence at the Paralympics is not merely a presence. This is a sign that Ukraine is and will remain a country, Shushikev told reporters on Thursday. The enormous challenge to get to Beijing meant that Sokiev, a member of Ukraine's parliament, had to sleep on the floor of a bus for 2 days, while other members of the delegation escaped missiles to get out of the country. More than 4 days and 4 nights we took come here. He added, it's a miracle that we're here. A part of our team was already abroad. A part of our team was in Ukraine. All the necessary equipment was in Ukraine. We had to unite all those parts, he said. It is 25 years I am president of the National Paralympic Committee of Ukraine, and never was it so difficult, so heavy to come to the Paralympic Games. Ukraine has been a formidable presence at the Winter Games in the past, bagging 22 medals, including 7 golds, and Pyongyang 4 years ago. The country's 20-strong contingent, accompanied by 9 guides, will feature in the biathlon and cross-country skiing, with some athletes already hitting the slopes in Zhangjiakou ahead of the 2 events. Asked whether the team would be able to go home at the end of the Games given the situation in Ukraine, Sokiev said he wasn't sure. I don't know. Going back is not simple. I hope the international community takes a real step during the Paralympics to stop the war.
Formula One will no longer race in Russia after sports terminated its contract with the promoter of the Russian Grand Prix. It said on Thursday, in response of the country's invasion of the neighbouring Ukraine.
The event, which was set to move to a new track outside St. Petersburg next year from its current Sochi Olympic Park venue, had a contract until 2025. The sport announced the cancellation of the 2022 race, originally scheduled for September 25th last week. Formula One can confirm it has terminated its contract with the Russian Grand Prix promoter, meaning Russia will not have a race in the future, a statement from the sport's commercial rights holder, which decides the calendar, said. Formula One's move to effectively pull out of Russia comes after the sport's governing body, the FIA, on Tuesday condemned the country's invasion of Ukraine, but said Russian and Belarusian drivers could still take part in its competitions in a neutral capacity. British Federation Motorsport UK on Wednesday banned Russian and Belarusian license holders from racing in the country regardless of the flag they compete under. Nikita Mazepin is the only Russian on the Formula One grid. The 22-year-old already faces an uncertain future after his US-owned Haas team removed all branding related to Russian potash producer and title sponsor Uralkali from its car on the final day of last week's Barcelona test. Uralkali is owned by Mazepin's father, oligarch Dmitry Mazepin, and the fate of the partnership and the Russians' continued presence at the team is set to be decided this week. The Russian Grand Prix joined the calendar in 2014. It has been attended by President Vladimir Putin in the past, with the Russian leader even handing out trophies on the podium. Russia launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine last week, with Belarus used as a key staging area.
Now let's have a look at the weather and what you can expect for tomorrow. And finally, David Matala, known as the Piano Man, is a 40-year-old Italian pianist who travelled from Germany to the Polish border to serenade the welcome of the Ukrainian refugees.
This isn't the first time the pianist has shown up to lift people's spirits in areas of conflict. He first became known as the Piano Man in Istanbul when he played his baby grand piano at Taksim Square while Turkish anti-government protesters and police clashed in 2013. He also traveled to Donetsk when the Russians occupied a government building in 2014 and played outside the Bataclan Theater after the attacks in Paris in 2015. At the Polish border, he played Imagine by John Lennon on his signature piano on wheels with a white peace sign painted on its lid. He was joined at the keyboard by a Ukrainian woman to play We Are the Champions by Queen. Other refugees also sang along to his version of Volare by Gypsy Kings. Martello ultimately aims to promote peace through music.
Thank you for watching the Daily Roundup here on EAC News Channel. For more breaking news and updates, check our website eacnews.asia or search EAC News on the Telegram or your favourite app store. More from the EAC News team tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We'll see you then.